Was there emotion before human existence? This question seems absurd at first glance. But what if it contains a truth that has been hidden from you from beginning? Since childhood, you've heard about the famous "let there be light." But what existed before the light? What pulsed in absolute silence, where neither time nor form nor flesh existed? Did the universe already feel before it was formed? Did the Creator already vibrate with emotions, even before shaping the first being? Stay with me until the end. What you discover now may surprise you. Most religious traditions teach that emotion is a consequence of human experience. Pain, joy, love, anger, feelings that only arise when the soul enters the flesh. But what if this narrative is incomplete? What if emotions are not just human reactions, but manifestations of something much more ancient, something divine? Have you ever felt deeply touched by something you can't explain? A memory that isn't yours, a longing for something you never experienced? What if this feeling is an echo of an ancient emotion present in the universe even before the creation of man? In the sacred scriptures, there are subtleties that few perceive, like the Spirit of God hovering over the waters before any command was given. Hovering, feeling, contemplating, weeping, loving. Emotions are invisible, and perhaps that's why they're so close to the eternal. Perhaps they're the first language, the first word, the true mystery of creation. They never spoke about this in churches. But forgotten, hidden, and even forbidden texts suggest that feelings may have been the breath before the breath, the desire before the will, the vibration before the light. And here begins the revelation. But be careful. What follows is not for everyone. It is for those who dare to question, for those who sense that there is something hidden, something sacred, something that has been erased from the history of creation. So get ready, because what comes next can completely transform what you understand by spirituality, emotion, and existence. Maybe you're feeling something right now, a shiver, a restlessness, or even a quiet peace. It's no coincidence. It's as if something inside you recognizes that it already knew, even without words, that there was more than matter, more than the story you've been told. Emotion before creation. It seems impossible, but there are truths that only the Spirit understands. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below with what's touched you most so far. Have you ever felt an emotion that didn't feel like your own? A faceless love? A nameless longing? Your experience may be similar to that of others here, and when you share, you don't just participate, you awaken. And if this video made you reflect, if it made you look at the invisible with new eyes, click the like button. It seems like a small gesture, but it's what shows the algorithm and me that this type of content needs to continue. It's the most direct way to keep this search for the mysteries of creation alive. And of course, if this journey calls to you, if you feel the need to go further, subscribe to the channel. Here, with each video, we'll dig deeper, not to find ready-made answers, but to open portals. Portals to what was always there, but hidden. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this kind of content. Because the more people awaken, the closer we get to the truth that echoes since before the light. And speaking of echoes, there's a sound that vibrated before matter, a language that was not spoken with the mouth, but with the being itself. And that's what we're going to talk about now. Can emotion only exist where there is flesh, where there is a physical heart, pulsing blood, responding to impulses? Or is there something deeper, more ancient, an emotional vibration that doesn't depend on any body to exist? When you think of feelings, you probably associate them with your most human experiences. Love, loss, fear, ecstasy. But what if I told you that these feelings, these intimate forces, might be just pale reflections of something much older, something that existed before creation, before time, before even the light? Tradition teaches that God is love. But what does this mean when there was no one to love yet? Love for whom? Why pain? Euphoria for what reason? This is the key to the mystery. Because if God's love already existed before everything, then love is not a reaction. It is an essence. And if emotion is divine essence, then it precedes existence as we know it. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. Imagine a space where there is no form, no sound, no language, only consciousness. A consciousness so vast it cannot be contained in words. so intense it explodes into creation. In this scenario, wouldn't the first creative impulse have been a feeling, a burning desire to express, an almost uncontrollable urge to overflow? Behind the scenes of creation, long before Let There Be Light, perhaps a phenomenon occurred that was not physical, but emotional, something that impacted not matter, but eternity itself. Emotion as a primordial language. Emotion as the seed of everything. Emotion as the breath that gave birth to breath. And here comes a hidden truth that few have the courage to consider. Emotion may be the invisible structure of reality, the first architecture, that which vibrates behind matter, sustaining all that exists. Divine emotions, non-human, unlimited, pure, absolute, original emotions. Consider the concept of wisdom as presented in Proverbs 8. She speaks, she feels, she was with God from the beginning, and rejoiced before him. A text that seems poetic, but carries a profound code, that of a spiritual entity or principle that feels before it exists. And this leads us to an inevitable question. If there was joy before creation, what else was there? This shift in mindset is powerful, because it forces us to think beyond our biology, to consider that perhaps our emotional journey here on Earth isn't a process that begins within us, but echoes something much older, as if we were tuned, however imperfectly, to an eternal emotional frequency. And that changes everything. It changes how we view our decisions. It changes the impact of our choices. It changes our understanding of connection, of emptiness, of longing. Perhaps the sadness we sometimes feel isn't just ours. Perhaps it's the memory of something we felt before we were born. Perhaps this silent anguish that sometimes invades the soul is the echo of a separation, not from Earth, but from the divine. What if emotion is not a byproduct of life, but its cause? What if creation was driven not by a logical order, but by an emotional overflow? Not a calculation, but a cry? Not a plan, but an eternal impulse to express oneself? This isn't just theory. Many mystics, theologians, and ancient sages suggest that the universe wasn't simply thought, but felt. That every star, every sound, every particle carries within itself a trace of the original emotion, as if creation were a cosmic tear or a silent laugh spread across space. And when we look through this lens, everything changes. The world is no longer just matter and movement. It is crystallized emotion, sacred vibration. The universe, then, can be understood as a love letter written before time. And we, like readers who at birth, forget the origin of this letter, but recognize it silently when we find it. Comment below. I'm on this journey too. I want to know who else feels that there's something bigger vibrating behind the visible. Because, believe me, this connection could be just a beginning. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. There's a scene in Genesis that almost always goes unnoticed. It's the second verse of the Bible. So brief, so subtle, but if you pay attention, you might find one of the greatest secrets ever recorded in words. It's written, "And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters." A detail almost no one questions. But stop and think, why was he hovering? And more, what was he feeling while he was hovering? That word, hovered, carries a fixed silence. It's not an act of creation. It's not explosive movement. It's contemplation. It's presence. It's something between rest and wakefulness, as if the Spirit itself were feeling something that not even time could name. The Bible doesn't say he acted, spoke, or created in that moment. It only says he was there, hovering, feeling. And herein lies the mystery. Was this hovering an emotion in itself, a divine expectation, a longing for something that didn't yet exist, or a memory of something that had already been lost? Even before visible creation? Many scholars dismiss this passage as a mere prelude to creation. But what if it's the opposite? What if it's the emotional beginning of everything? A pause charged with intention. A sacred instant with Creator in absolute silence, carried within himself a universe of feelings. The Spirit hovered, perhaps because he loved before loving, hurt before pain, desired before desire. This interpretation changes our entire spiritual mindset, because it reveals that creation may not have begun with a command, but with an emotion. The impact of this insight is profound. It means that emotion was not a byproduct of creation. It was the original seed. And perhaps, by hovering over the waters, God was connecting with the vastness of what was yet to come, like an artist looking at a blank canvas and feeling. This even transforms our reading of Genesis. The waters over which the Spirit hovered were not merely physical. They may represent the divine unconscious, the original emotional chaos, the infinite field where everything was still possible, but nothing yet had form. And the Spirit, moving over this liquid abyss, was not merely observing. It was engaging. Completely. This scene has powerful implications for who we are. Because if we were created in the image and likeness of God and God felt before he acted, then our emotions are not weaknesses. They are inheritances. They are traces of what came before flesh, before bones, before time, behind the scenes of existence. What hovers is not just a spirit. It is the eternal feeling that precedes us. And perhaps when you feel something profound, inexplicable, that even you don't understand, you are touching on that same invisible field, a place where the silent echo of the Spirit can still be heard upon the waters. And the most curious thing is that the Bible doesn't describe this moment as cold or technical. There's no calculation. There's no rush. It's as if time stops so the Spirit can just felt, and that changes everything. Because it invites us to realize that before divine order, there was divine sensitivity. Before let there be, there was presence, pure emotion. This hidden truth reveals that the Creator didn't create the universe out of necessity, but out of emotion. And this makes us rethink even our daily decisions. How often do we feel something before acting? How often do we deny an emotion because it seemed rational? What if the irrational is precisely the most divine part of us? When we understand this, our spiritual journey shifts focus. We move from the fear of punishment, from the obsession with rules, to a relationship. Because if God felt, he related to himself before relating to us. He didn't create out of obligation. He created through expression. And expression is emotion in motion. The way the Spirit hovers can teach us how to live. Perhaps this is what he wants us to do before any creation. Pause. Feel. Allow emotion to guide us, not as weakness, but as a sacred compass. And if you followed this line of reasoning thus far, you may have felt something similar. An invisible presence in a moment of solitude, a profound peace for no apparent reason, a tear that fell without visible pain. These manifestations may be more than human experiences. They may be spiritual memories, fragments of what hover within the Spirit. Even before the first day, comment below, this makes sense to me. I want to see who is really diving into this journey, because what's coming next goes even deeper. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. There's an idea that's been planted in our minds from an early age, that emotion is something exclusive to the flesh, as if a beating heart, a processing brain, and a reacting body are necessary for us to feel something real. But what if this is only a superficial layer of the truth? What if feeling is, in fact, what precedes all form? Think about it. If we only feel because we have bodies, then don't the angels? Are the cherubim surrounding the divine throne merely obedient, emotionless machines? And what about the Creator himself? How can we explain expressions like holy wrath, eternal love, divine jealousy, and heavenly compassion? They're all there in Scripture. But no one stops to question what they really mean. God's wrath, for example, has always been treated as punishment. But what if it's a legitimate feeling, one that overflows not with cruelty, but with intensity? A pure emotion, one that doesn't conform to our human standards, but it's still an emotion, just like his love, which doesn't depend on merit, reciprocity, or logic. It's eternal. It precedes time. It's essence. And essence feels. This vision changes everything, because it dismantles the idea that spirituality is neutral, cold, and indifferent. On the contrary, the divine feels more, not less. It feels more broadly, more deeply, more intensely, without the constraints of the body, without the limitations of the ego, without the filters of survival. Pure feelings without distortion. And when you look at ancient texts with this new mindset, you realize how this is everywhere. The Psalms, for example, are not just poems. They are spiritual outpourings, emotional cries. David didn't just speak with words. He spoke with his soul. He felt, and he believed that God felt too. He shouted, wept, worshipped, because he recognized an invisible heart that beat without flesh. Even Christ himself in the New Testament constantly expresses emotions. He pities, he gets angry, he weeps. And if he is the incarnation of the Word, then we are faced with powerful revelation. The Word, before becoming flesh, already felt. Before walking among men, he already vibrated with emotion. This shatters any limited view that reduces feelings to the biological. This is a hidden truth that few dare to explore, because it's easier to accept a distant, logical, impassive God, a God who doesn't suffer, who doesn't truly love, who isn't shaken. But this isn't the God of the Bible. The God of the Bible is saddened, rejoices, gets angry. He is involved. He cares. And this means that feeling isn't a sign of spiritual weakness. It's a sign of spiritual origin. This revelation has a direct impact on our decisions, because we begin to see our emotions not as obstacles, but as messages, as echoes, as clues to a presence that inhabits us and precedes us. And this change is transformative, because it restores our dignity to feel. It connects us with the invisible. It reconnects us with our original purpose. How many times have you felt strained for feeling too much, for loving too intensely, for having intuitions no one else understands? What if these experiences are actually fragments of a forgotten inheritance? As if your spirit is trying to remember what it once felt before you existed? What if the cry that escapes for no reason is actually the soul touching a pain that didn't begin with you, a pain that comes from afar, that perhaps comes from heaven itself, a sacred pain, a longing for what hasn't yet happened, but has already been promised? This kind of reflection isn't common, because it requires courage. Courage to break with what we've been taught. Courage to look within honestly, to accept that we are more than flesh. We are living emotion that already existed in the invisible. Comment, this makes sense to me. I want to hear who else is vibrating at the same frequency, because the truth is still unfolding. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. Most people only know the surface of what has been preserved in Scripture, but there's a subterranean, a silent labyrinth of texts that have been banned, forgotten, or deemed too dangerous for common faith. In these texts, there are revelations that completely challenge the traditional view of spirituality. Revelations that show us that emotions are not just human, they are eternal. In the book of Enoch, for example, we find passages describing celestial beings who weep. Yes, angels who feel sadness, who observe the corruption of the earth and mourn deeply. They are not obedient automatons. They feel, they have desires. They are aware of loss. They express what many believe to be exclusive to the human soul. But how can we explain this feeling in beings who have never inhabited the flesh? These angels, upon witnessing the fall, not only testify, they are shaken. And this tells us a lot. Because if even heaven feels, then emotion is not a weakness of the flesh, but an original trait of the divine essence. It's as if there were an emotional code running through everything created, and even through what has never been revealed. And there's more. In the book of the Wisdom of Solomon, classified as apocryphal by many, there's a phrase that sounds like a whisper from the beginning. Wisdom is a spirit that loves man. This small, almost imperceptible passage holds an abyss of meaning. If wisdom, who was with God before all else, loves, then she feels. And if she feels, she is not just a concept, she is an emotional entity. This changes our perception of creation, because it places emotion at the very heart of the divine. An emotion without a body, but not without form. An emotion that desires, that accompanies, that instructs, that protects. An emotion that is conscious, that knows who loves and why. These often ignored behind-the-scenes aspects of spirituality hold a kind of revelation that completely transforms our mindset, because it shows us that the deepest feelings we have, that inexplicable love, that causeless weeping, that enchantment with something invisible, may not be ours. Perhaps we are merely the point of contact through which older emotions flow into the physical world. This hypothesis opens a portal to something even greater. What if emotion is the language of heaven? Not Hebrew, not Aramaic, not words, but feeling, a language that doesn't need a voice, because it vibrates directly in the spirit. What if the prophets heard not sounds, but emotions that became words in their minds? What if true divine communication wasn't speech, but a clear, absolute, overwhelming feeling? This theory is echoed in several ancient spiritual traditions. Many describe encounters with beings of light where no words were spoken, but everything was understood. Understanding came like a wave, not logical, but emotional, as if the heart understood before reason, as if the soul remembered something the body never experienced. If we look honestly, most of humanity's greatest decisions have been driven by emotions, not logic. Compassion fuels revolutions. Pain writes poetry. Hope sustains entire nations. Fear destroys empires. And this isn't a coincidence. Emotion is a true engine of existence. What the hidden tradition of these forbidden texts is showing us is that from the beginning, feeling was divine. It was permitted. It was essential. And we were taught to stifle the very thing that connects us to what is greater. Just imagine, if angels wept for us, what does that say about the value of our journey? If celestial beings were moved by the fall of humanity, then our suffering is not ignored. It is shared. It reverberates. It touches the heavens. And if wisdom loves, even before we are formed, it means we were desired, that our existence was born of an emotion, not an experiment, not a project, but a deep, eternal, ardent feeling. This changes everything. This is the hidden truth that many avoid, because it demands that we look within ourselves with more reverence, with more listening, with more surrender. It demands that we stop rushing and start feeling, and truly feeling. Right there, I'm on this journey too. I want to see who is willing to dive into this abyss, not to get lost, but to rediscover what already existed before the first word. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. There's a chapter in Scripture that seems to have been written in code. It doesn't shout truths, it whispers. And when you listen with your heart, something inside you awakens. It's Proverbs 8, a text that, at first glance, seems to merely extol wisdom as a virtue. But when read with spiritual eyes, it reveals something much greater, a living entity, a conscious principle, something or someone that was with God before time, and more than that, that felt. In this chapter, wisdom speaks. She is not described. She describes herself. She has a voice. She has memory. She remembers the moment she was born, the time when there were no mountains, no oceans, no dust on the earth. She says, I was with him like an architect at his side, and each day was his joy. Stop for a second and absorb that. His joy. It's not a cold metaphor nor a technical symbol. It's emotion. It's bond. It's divine pleasure. This image completely breaks with the idea of an isolated, solitary, and impassive God. It reveals a relationship, a dance of affections before creation, an emotional partnership that cannot be ignored. Wisdom here is presented as more than an attribute. It is a being, a consciousness, and consciousness that feels as emotion in its purest form. What this text is insinuating, without saying it directly, is that emotion already pulsed in the invisible before anything visible was shaped, that the first movement of eternity was not an order, it was a bond, a shared joy, a living relationship between Creator and wisdom, even before the first let there be. And the seemingly poetic detail carries a profound spiritual impact, because if there was joy, there was emotion. If there was pleasure, there was engagement. This leads us to a radically new understanding. Creation did not arise from nothing. It was born from an emotional experience between eternal consciousnesses. Matter is the consequence. Feeling, the cause. This completely changes the way we interpret biblical symbols. Many of them have been reduced to empty metaphors or didactic allegories, but perhaps they are, in fact, keys. Signs of hidden truth that can only be accessed when we understand that the divine is not a concept. It is consciousness in a state of feeling. Love, joy, desire will, not as human expressions, but as eternal frequencies that shape realities. And here something even deeper comes into play. Symbols were not meant to teach. They were meant to remind. They serve not logic, but the soul's memory. A throne is not just power. It is the emotional seat of justice. A river is not just water. It is a spiritual flow of healing and renewal. A crown is not just royalty. It is honor bestowed with affection. Each element carries a frozen emotion, ready to be awakened in whoever observes with the right eyes. That's why some people cry when reading certain verses, even without fully understanding them. That's why a simple symbol can move the soul more than an entire treatise. Because divine truth doesn't need to be explained. It needs to be felt. And when you feel it, something inside you reorganizes. It's a silent, almost imperceptible transformation, but irreversible. The backstage of creation is full of these signs, and each one seems to carry an unspoken memory, as if there were a parallel story, a narrative that happened before the narrative, and that left emotional traces in everything that exists. And perhaps this is what we call spiritual intuition, when the soul recognizes a symbol, not through reason, but through the emotional vibration it emits. And if wisdom was with God in the beginning, and if she rejoiced, this means that creation was born within an atmosphere of pure emotion, that the basis of the universe was not a command, but an effective vibration. And perhaps this is why, to this day, everything that truly matters in the world is born of feeling. Art, faith, compassion, courage, repentance, they are all movements of the soul. Nothing begins outside. Everything begins within. This kind of revelation demands more than interpretation. It demands surrender. It demands a new way of seeing, and even more, a new way of feeling. Because if you can access this emotional layer of creation, you will realize that the great mysteries are not in the distant heavens. They are hidden in the silence of the emotions we carry and cannot name. Comment there. That makes sense to me. I want to see who is starting to remember what existed before words. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject when we talk about the beginning of everything. It's almost inevitable not to think of the expression, the Word became flesh. This well-known verse from the Gospel of John has been repeated so many times that it's practically become a formula, but few realize what it really means. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. But this word, the logos, in the original Greek, is not just a spoken word. It is a living expression. It is vibration. It is intention in its purest form. It is emotion before matter. The logos was not invented at the time of creation. Itera since the beginning of time. And if he was God and was with God, then he carries within himself all that God is. This includes not only creative power, but also creative emotion. The word is not only the order that forms, but the feeling that pulsates. It is the breath that moves because it desires. It is the principle that vibrates not with logic, but with love. Many forgotten mystics and theologians speak of this, that the Creator's first movement was not thought nor action, but love. A love that overflowed, that could not be contained. A love so dense, so complete, that it generated time, space, light, and life. Not as a reaction to something external, but as an expansion of something internal, not out of necessity. By essence, creation, then, was not a strategic decision. It was an effective expression. The word is this point of contact between what feels and what becomes. It is divine emotion condensed into reality. It is the emotional vibration that becomes form, sound, color, matter. The word is love in motion. And this changes absolutely everything about the way we understand the universe. Think with me. If everything that was created passed through the word, then everything that exists is, on some level, condensed emotion. Every leaf, every stone, every atom, every star, all are the fruit of a vibration-born divine feeling. And this gives a new dimension even to the concept of matter. It is not cold. It is not neutral. It is dormant emotion. It is the living memory of a moment of creation. This is one of the most preserved secrets in esoteric and Gnostic traditions. The idea that the universe is, essentially, an emotional body of the Creator, a spiritual body, yes, but with frequency, rhythm, and a pulse. That's why so many ancients associated the cosmos with music, with an eternal song that continues to resonate from the first sound. And every true sound is born of a feeling. Theologians like Origen, Clement Alexandria, and Kabbalah mystics saw this logos not as divine instruction, but as a sentient presence. something that feels and communicates that feeling, something that transmits will even before words are formed, a will that loves, that suffers, that manifests itself, and all this before time began to count. This kind of revelation isn't just curious, it has a direct impact on our way of life. Because if we were created by a word that feels, then we were made to feel, and not just to feel by chance, but to vibrate at the same frequency, to exist as emotional extensions of the Creator Himself. This is more than faith, it is identity. And identity, when discovered, transforms everything. That's why there's so much power in deep silences, in intuitions we can't explain, in dreams that touch us illogically, because the Word doesn't just speak with words. He speaks with vibration. And sometimes what we feel is precisely this language being activated within us. An emotional reminder that we are part of the same origin. We are conscious echoes of an eternal love that wasn't created, only expressed. This love that precedes everything is not limited to the beautiful feelings we know. It also manifests itself as zeal, as divine jealousy, as righteous anger, as burning compassion. Pure emotions untainted by the fall, but which already existed before sin, before the flesh, before doubt. And this teaches us that emotion is not a result of human frailty. It is evidence of our spiritual heritage. So when you feel something you can't explain, maybe you're not crazy. Maybe you're hearing the echo of the word. Maybe you're being reached by a love that still vibrates from the beginning. A love that hasn't run out, that hasn't changed, that still pulses. Comment below, this makes sense to me. I want to see who's feeling the same vibration that can't be explained, but that transforms from within, because it's still expanding, and the mystery is far from over. Now I want to go even deeper into the subject. Perhaps everything you felt throughout your life, from first shivers of enchantment to the quietest pains unseen, was more than simple chemical reactions. Perhaps these feelings are vestiges, traces, subtle signs of something that was already here before you were even born, before any body was shaped, before any story began. And if it's true that the word was expressed emotion, then perhaps the first vibration of the universe wasn't sound, but a feeling, an emotional touch that pierced nothingness and became light, form, life. And if this is true, then we have to ask ourselves, what else existed before creation? Because if love was not created, but revealed, then love has always been. It was in God's heart before there was a heaven to be observed or time to be counted. And this in itself radically changes our spiritual mindset. It changes our relationship with origin because it shows that we were not just designed, we were desired. And this is not a poetic metaphor. It is a revelation of identity. We were formed from an emotion, generated not by necessity, but by affection. Creation was not a task. It was a surrender, an overflow of something so intense it could no longer be contained. And if that something is love, then everything that came after carries a vibration of that original love. Now imagine the impact this has on your own journey. You feel, you desire, you suffer, love, lose, surrender. And most people say these are all human frailties. But what if they are, in fact, the keys to the divine within you? What if your deepest feelings are the memory of your origin, the code that vibrates within your existence, reminding you of where you came from? Think about it. If love is eternal, what else can be eternal? The longing we feel for something we never experienced. Is it really an illusion? Or is it the soul trying to remember the place where it all began? And what about silence? That presence we feel in moments of solitude that embraces us without words. What if this is a memory of the spirit that hovered over the waters, still hovering within us? This possibility isn't just philosophical, it's spiritual. It's a transformation in how we perceive reality, because it invites us to see the invisible not as emptiness, but as silent plenitude, to realize that what we don't see can be what shapes us most, that what we don't understand with our minds can be what resonates most with our spirits. And if so, then emotion isn't just a consequence. It's the first act. It's the secret origin of everything. Emotion as a silent verb, a language that precedes language. Emotion as the very heartbeat of the universe, which continues to echo even now, waiting for someone to hear it, recognize it, and feel it. Comment. That makes sense to me. I want to know who's feeling the same truth vibrating inside, because the next question that awaits us is even deeper. If emotion existed before creation, what about language? Was there a secret language, a forbidden sound, a voice that echoed without a mouth? Perhaps the sky speaks a language that men have forgotten, and perhaps that can still be heard. If you've made it this far, it's because something inside you felt it. Maybe there's no exact explanation, and that's okay. Some truths don't arrive through logic. They just touch. And when they touch, they stay. If this journey resonated with you, if at some point something inside you awakened, if some part of what was said felt more like a memory than something new, then this is the kind of content you'll find here. Subscribe to the channel to continue walking with me through these mysteries that most never dare to explore. With each new video, we delve deeper. We unearth what was forgotten. We remember what was always there. Oh, if you made it to the end, leave a comment below. I'm with you until the end. It's the simplest way for me to know who is walking along on this journey. And if at any point while listening, you felt that strange, wonderful connection, as if something that had been silent inside you had finally found a voice, please leave a like. It's just a button, I know, but it's what shows me in this space that this conversation is worth continuing. There's a video here that complements this topic. Click and continue with me there, because there are some things that can't stop here.